Welcome to the Healer's Corner podcast with your hosts, Melissa Wiles and Maria Cerna.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Healer's Corner. We have with us tonight Peter. And Peter, you've got a pretty interesting life story, and we're kind of excited. Not kind of, we're very excited. This is one of the ones Maria was like, get him. And I'm like, okay, I'm emailing. But you've had a pretty full life, and you are now on a healing journey and helping others heal. So where do you even start in your story for everybody?
Yeah. I mean, the easy place to start in a way is when I was diagnosed on the same day with Lyme disease and leukemia, because that caused the decision that ultimately led to being trained as a hypnotherapist and then helping other people. That's kind of where that starts. Somebody was asking me on a different podcast earlier today, though, about like what were the seeds? And I was talking about my grandfather, and I was talking about my grandmother, and what I learned from them, I think, equipped me for when I was diagnosed. So it really just depends on, do you want the short story? You want the long story? Do you want...
We got 45 minutes to an hour to kill.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the simple one is on the same day when I was volunteering to be a firefighter in Connecticut, they came up with this, you have Lyme disease and you have leukemia. And it came out of the blue. I feel like it was getting hit upside the head with a spiritual 2x4. I think I was walking down a path that wasn't where my spirit wanted to be. I don't think I was listening to the other signs that I was obviously getting and wasn't paying attention to it. So it took, not one diagnosis, but two. And one of them was life-threatening to get me to pay attention, to get me to wake up. And it was not an easy process. It was like maybe a 3-year period between diagnosis and then finding my way into being a hypnotherapist. And I did all kinds of things. I mean, the allopathic road after 2 visits to the hematologist-oncologist was like, this isn't going to work because they're even telling me, we don't know what causes this. We don't know how to cure it. And so I went down a little bit down an Ayurvedic path. I went down a naturopathic avenue that I thought was extremely valuable. The Ayurvedic thing was a Panchakarma weekend, which to me was more spiritually meaningful. I did another long weekend of Tai Chi, and that was also spiritually meaningful. And I think that was the point for me, was to bring me out of the just day-to-day struggling to get through life into the spiritual plane. But it took, as I say, these very dramatic kinds of events. And I think for people who are stubborn, and I'm going to put myself in that camp, it takes more dramatic things to get us to move off the dime than for other people who are more sensitive and more open to, hey, reading the signs, reading the tea leaves.
Now, how old were you when you got your double diagnosis there?
I was I was 41, which was 23 years ago. When I asked the doctors after I was diagnosed, how long do I have? They said maybe 10 years.
That nobody wants to hear that, right?
Nobody wants to hear that, especially at the time. I have 3 children and they were all little at the time. And they were like 4, 6, and 8, or 2, 4, and 6. And it was just devastating to think about leaving them, leaving my wife, leaving my kids when they were so little. It was just heartbreaking. And I was committed to doing whatever I could to extend my life.
Now, are you considered remission or cancer-free now at this point?
No, but my white blood cell count is less than half of what it was when I was diagnosed.
That's awesome.
And I got to this point after I went through my training in 2006. I went out to the training in Santa Fe, New Mexico, seeing everything through the lens of leukemia. And I came back where it felt like it was in the rearview mirror. It felt like, oh, that's just this chapter in my life. It felt like it wasn't defining me anymore. And I totally calmed down about the whole thing.
Now, you mentioned you were going through different types of healing journeys. Like, what kind of led you down into that? I know you said it was like spiritual, but like, what made you be interested in like Ayurveda?
The Ayurveda was just a suggestion from my wife. And what this diagnosis did for me, I would say, is it cracked my mind open, because I realized that everything I had thought, everything I had done, the way I was living got me to this point of this diagnosis, and that what was going to save me was going to be different. And so I became open to things that I previously would not have been open to. I had never even received a massage before I was 41. Like, I was kind of, I think, locked into just a certain way of doing things. And because our kids were so little and, I felt like I was so new to raising children, so new to being married. I didn't have any brothers or sisters, that the whole thing was just like this tsunami of stress and effort. I was working 4 days a week on Wall Street, a block and a half away from the World Trade Center. I was headed down there on 9/11. It was a war zone. The other fifth day during the week, I was starting and running a security guard business. I was restoring a 100-year-old house. I was mowing the lawn. I was painting. I was taking care of kids. It was just nuts. It was operation
When did you
overload.
sleep? When
What?
did you sleep?
That's kind of all I did. I mean, my wife and I were just, handing kids off and doing different things, and it was unsustainable,
Yeah.
especially for a guy who'd lived a pretty calm and easy life prior to getting married. That suddenly I felt like I went into the deep end. And I just think that from the time I was a kid, I had this mentality like, I'm just going to have to do it myself. I'm just going to have to do it myself. And this was just too much. And I'm sure that's part of the reason of what pushed me over into this diagnosis. Working down at ground zero with all the crap in the air that we were breathing, that couldn't have helped either. I had 13 mercury amalgam fillings and I had them all removed slowly over time. I know that didn't help. And I came to believe that, like a naturopath says, if you're sick, it's because you have environmental toxins and or you don't have the essential building blocks that you need. And I came to take on the same belief about emotional toxins. Because the mind and body are connected, if you have old traumas from the past, it's very likely that they're going to be exerting that negative energy on your body. And your body is likely at some point to express something that relates back to these earlier traumas.
I think they finally have some science now about like generational trauma being in the genes.
Oh, yeah.
So, carrying that forward. So it's like we almost come into this life with a to-do list already, right?
Right.
Mhm.
And if we don't do it, we're basically passing it along to our children.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I also believe, too, that quantum physicists tell us that there's no time. That time is an illusion created by a planet that's rotating on its own axis and it's orbiting the sun. Gives us day and night and it gives us the seasons. But just outside that system, it's easy to understand there is no time, which coincidentally is the reality for our subconscious mind. It has no time.
Mhm.
And therefore, if we heal something and we're connected to our ancestors and we're connected to our offspring, then it makes sense to me that the healing wouldn't be just for us. It would go in our conscious mind backwards and forwards all at the same time.
Mhm. Yeah. I do believe in that also. But I'm curious. You said that you were brought up that you had to do things for yourself. When did you let that go and said, "Okay, I need help"?
That's a great question. And it takes me back to this, to a stubborn person, they have to get hit in the head with a spiritual 2x4. So the leukemia and Lyme disease diagnosis on the same day apparently wasn't enough for me. 2 years later, in 2005, I was on a trip with my wife and kids. They were still little, to Puerto Rico. And on the first day that we got there, kind of late in the day, I saw all these surfers out in the bay. And I really wanted to surf. Now, I wasn't a surfer. I got up on a surfboard for about 3 seconds in Hawaii, I think earlier that year. And I thought, well, I'm going to try it again. So I rented a surfboard. I went down to the beach and the next day and I looked out and there was no one out there. And I thought, well, this is not a good sign. This has to be bad. And then I had this thought, well, you've been diagnosed with leukemia. Who cares? And so I go out into the water and I'm out there and just getting knocked around, getting tired. And I think, well, it's probably time to go in. So I go in, I've drifted about a half mile down the beach and I get about 20 yards from the shore. And I think, well, I can see these waves breaking on the shore. And I didn't want to get caught with the surfboard that was attached to my ankle, thinking that that might hit me in the head or something. So I made what could have been a fatal mistake. I took the surfboard off and I pushed it in and I started swimming to shore. And a wave knocked me down and I kept swimming and a wave knocked me down and I kept swimming and I realized I'm making no progress. I must have been in like a rip current or something. And I didn't have the presence of mind to think, oh, swim parallel to the shore and swim out of the rip. I didn't understand that. I started getting more and more tired. And just at this moment of real intense worry and fear, because the waves kept knocking me underwater and I'd come back up and I was just getting more and more tired. A man that I had said hello to when I went out, walked a half mile down the beach just to check on me. Now, this also, in retrospect, I don't think was random. And so He yells out to me. He said, "Are you okay?" He yelled out. And for the first time in my life, I yelled back to him as loud as I could, "I need help," as loud as I could. I watched him, as soon as I yelled that, turn and run for the surfboard, which was like, that was really smart. As soon as he turned to run, right after I'd yelled this thing, I'm not kidding you, I felt like the hand of God lifted me up by my posterior, threw me up and onto the beach, slammed down on a rock. Almost to the instant. It couldn't have been more than 5 seconds after I completed saying I need help. I felt like I was being lifted up out of the water and thrown onto the beach.
I think that is a perfect example where you challenge the universe, hold my beer, I can do it. And the universe said, bet. And but it was all good because that light bulb moment, right? Of being able to say, I need help, and that quick, instantaneous help from
Instantaneous.
everything around you.
Unbelievable. Like, just, it still amazes me. I can still feel myself in this position like this, with my arms coming back and being lifted up by my posterior and coming all the way in and then slamming my left heel onto a rock on the beach. And then the guy saw that and he ran back to me and he grabbed my arm and pulled me back up onto, where the waves weren't still crashing.
Are you still in touch? Did you keep in touch with this gentleman after you left, or?
No, I should have, but my wife and my 3 kids came down. So they got there maybe 5 or 10 minutes after I was out. And I was so exhausted. I was just lying on the sand. I was spent. And my youngest son, who must have been 4 at the time, he built a little sand castle around me to protect me. It was so cute.
That's adorable.
Adorable. And I was so moved, thinking, God, I thought my life, when I had that thought of, you've been diagnosed with leukemia, who cares? Go on out. It's like I had undervalued my life. And so I think that incident was to help to teach me the value of not just my life, but all human life. No matter what the situation is, that all human life has sanctity, all human life has value. And also to teach me the lesson, of course, that it's important to ask for help, that it's not shameful, that I shouldn't be expected to do everything, there are times when everyone needs help, including me.
I love the idea of the sand castle around you on the beach.
It still melts my heart when I think about it.
Now, are you and your kids, like, you guys are close, are they continuing on some of, like, the spiritual work that you're doing as well, as they've watched you go through your journey?
Not professionally. I think they all have a sensitivity and an awareness to it, for sure, but none of them are walking down that path per se. My youngest seems to be walking down the path of first responder. And I know that comes from growing up with a dad who was a firefighter EMT, and they would have their birthday parties at the firehouse. I'd put them in the turnout gear and hold an axe, take their friends up on the ladder truck and then the pumpers. And like, they really had an amazing experience being little and growing up in and around the firehouse. And every time one of the fire apparatus would drive past our house, they'd honk the horn. The kids would be out there waving, and it's really cool. And my eldest, he moved out to California to be an ocean lifeguard. So that also was a first responder. So both boys got an interest in that for sure.
Yes, yes. Did you take some time to process? I mean, being diagnosed, hearing it from someone tell you, do you have X amount of this is what's going on, da da da. But did you have a really, like, go within and process before you jump into and really dive into the spiritual path? Or was it a just what you call an upscale that's gradually growing? Or because some people, when they have that diagnosis, at least the clients that I see, it was a hard thing for them to process what they've been told that they have. And they went through a moment of just feeling so, why me, why me, why me, why me? And then later on they said, oh, you know what? I'm gonna do something about this. I'm gonna see every single avenue. So what time frame did you have from the process to going into the spiritual path?
I think it was fairly slow. I mean, it was about 3 years, from 2003 when I was diagnosed which would have been like May, until I went to study hypnotherapy, which is where I really got on the spiritual path, like all full in. And that would have been, say, September of 2006. It was a good 3+ years there. What I had done during that time helped cultivate it. Now, I definitely started in a place of denial, and I definitely had some bargaining, and I definitely had anger, major, major anger. The why me? I was so angry. I was so upset about this. And then I would say, like, the panchakarma thing. There was a doctor who was both an MD and an Ayurvedic doctor, and I spent the weekend with him and maybe, I don't know, 7 or 8 other students, and I had a chance to really talk to him a lot. And he was a great bridge because he was talking about medical, but he was also talking about the Ayurvedic traditions of thinking about disease and where it comes from and the emotional components. There was a meditative aspect to our time together, as well as like this 2 people doing a massage with an oil drip going on the center of the forehead for about 2 hours, and I was having visions and everything. So that helped to open things up a little bit. I also did qigong, and that was the same kind of thing. It was an intense weekend. I had visions while I was there. I was reading different books because I was searching for sure. But I would say that I got on the spiritual path while I was in New Mexico, during that very long, deep, immersive process. And most decidedly when I was not in class. It was happening mostly when I was out in nature. Although there was one incident where I was with 3 other students and we were just doing our own thing. And I had 2 spontaneous past life regressions, and I met the Virgin Mary during this little exercise that we were doing at one of their apartments.
Now, did you get into hypnotherapy in a way at first, like as a patient to kind of figure like what's going on? How did I get here? How do I further my healing? And then kind of like I can help others? Or did you jump in as like, I'm going to help other people?
I already had that help other people mentality from the fire service. So I'd already been doing that for about 3 years. And I really jumped into that with both feet. I found it kind of a relief. It was something I felt like I could do that had meaning. And I think in retrospect, it probably distracted me a little bit from freaking out about my own situation. Focusing on helping other people helped me in that sense. I came face to face with everything you can imagine that happens to people. People that are at the lowest moment of their life when their house is on fire, fatalities. One of the stories that was very impactful to me is I was thinking about what I was going through, and I was worried about my health, and my pager went off. And in that department, we responded directly to the scene in our personal vehicles, and then the fire apparatus met us there. And I was the second one at the scene because I was already in my car and I was already driving in the direction of where this incident was. And I got there and I saw a car, 2-door coupe. And when I first looked at it, I couldn't tell what the front end was and what the back end was. It was so badly damaged. And I ran up to it, and there was a guy lying on the ground, turned out later to be 18 years old, and he was gone. I could just tell he was just gone. And the only other firefighter there at the moment, before all the others got there with the apparatus, was an officer, and he said, "Get the driver out." And so I went around to the driver's side, and I went in to move him out. And I saw that his head was rotated 180 degrees. So his body was facing forward, but his head was facing straight backward. And this officer looked at that and saw me start to move him, and he said, "Just leave him. Just leave him." And what I took away from that incident was the truth, not just the intellectual truth, but the visceral truth that none of us is guaranteed anything. That 5 minutes before, when I had been obsessing about my own situation, these 2 kids, 18 and 22, probably didn't have a healthcare concern in the world. And 5 minutes later, they were both dead and I was still alive. And it really, I don't know, it put things, that kind of thing puts things in perspective for you,
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, it does.
you asked, I went out to be trained in hypnotherapy. I would say the primary motivator was I have to learn how to control my mind so that I can control my body, so that I can maximize my time, so I won't leave my kids and my wife. That was the primary motivator. But there also was this other component that already lived in me, which wanted to help. So I kind of feel like it was both. I had no clue how I was going to do it when I came back, but I knew that wasn't going to be it. I wasn't just going to get the training, to help myself, and then that would be the end of it.
Now, in those wow, stressful situations and keeping your mind calm? Like, what is it that you do to kind of catch yourself and come back to a centered focus and stay calm?
In the fire department, there's a lot of training around that. There's a lot of training that there's a kind of perspective shift that they help you with. So, for example, we were taught that our first responsibility at any scene was to ourselves. Second responsibility was to fellow firefighters. Third responsibility was to bystanders. Fourth responsibility was to victim. Because they kept emphasizing how we don't want you to do something stupid to create another problem.
Fair point.
And it's so easy because our human impulse is to run toward the most flame that you see, to run toward the car that's the most damaged, to run toward the person who has the most blood on them or something. But what they teach you is stop, just do a 360 before you do a thing. Because we don't want you to trip over a live wire that's down because of a car accident and electrocute yourself. We don't want you to start treating a patient because they've got some, blood and cuts and everything on their arm, but they've got something that's potentially deadly sticking out of their back. You have to do a rapid assessment of the whole person, just like they wanted you to do a rapid assessment of the whole scene so that you understood what you were getting into. They constantly drilled into us, no running, like always, every single year, because that's what you want to do. You want to run and you get tunnel vision. And so they were working against those two things. Slow down, look at the whole picture, then take action. So there was a lot of training there that I felt helped with that. The only time I was aware of any PTSD from anything regarding an incident was when I was traveling with my family. I wasn't even in the state where I was a firefighter, and I didn't have any equipment with me, and there was a bad motorcycle accident right in front of us. And when I got to the guy who was in the motorcycle accident, he had one of his legs was corkscrewed, and he had a really bad tissue wound near his groin, and his eyes were rolling back in his head, and I had nothing. No equipment, no radio, nobody else was there. I didn't get a page ahead of time saying this is what you're going to be encountering. And eventually, local fire personnel and EMS showed up. A helicopter showed up. I stayed there the whole time. I helped load him onto the helicopter, and off he went. For about 2 or 3 weeks, I was having flashbacks to that because there was no preparation, because there was no one else there to help. And I kept asking myself, did I do everything right? Did I make any mistakes? Should I have done anything different? It was just this loop of those thoughts. And then after about 3 weeks, they just kind of faded away.
I was just going to ask if you did some sort of meditation or hypnotherapy to help release that and let that go.
I would have with what I know now, but with where I was then, I don't think I did. I think I met with my spirit guides. I think I did some praying and maybe that helped, but I didn't know at the time, or I somehow didn't connect it that I should try to do some kind of trauma release. I just remember it kind of fading on its own.
I could see where I personally probably would fall into a guilt. I didn't do enough because I didn't have what I needed. Did you find that there was maybe the guilt with, kind of that replay, that PTSD, when you were saying what could I have done something more? Was that more of a guilt, or was that something completely different?
I think it was going in that direction. But every time I asked the question, I couldn't come up with an answer like, oh yeah, you missed this, or yeah, you should have done that. None of that happened. In fact, in Connecticut, we were trained as EMTs to leave the helmet on the person, that the act of taking the helmet off might damage their cervical spine, and that we were to leave it on and let the emergency room, let the doctor and the personnel there take it off. And the first arriving EMS guys started to take it off, and I stopped them. I said, no, leave it on. You're supposed to leave it on. They're like, no, we're taking it off. So I still feel like that was I followed my training. I was doing the right thing. But there was that constant questioning. And it happened too when, I don't know if you can see this dog here, right there. Yeah, his name was Sam, and he died a couple of years ago, and he was 14 and a half, and his breathing got really bad, and the vet said, it's time. And consciously, I knew it was the right choice to make. But afterwards, I still had the same thing. It was, did I make the right call? Should I have waited? And the answer consciously coming back, no, it was the right time. But there was still that very human, I would suggest, questioning. And I believe a lot of people go through that. Even when they consciously believe, no, I did the very best I could, there's still that gnawing part of us. And in the case of Sam, I meet with him every day in my meditation with my spirit guides. And I had been doing that for a couple of years before he passed. So I was able to talk to him and say, Sam, did I make any mistakes? And hear from him. And that really brought the most amount of peace, which is what happens when I work with clients when they lose somebody that's close to them, whether it's a person or it's an animal. That meeting with that being finally puts everything to rest. It reminds the spiritual part of us that, yeah, we have a physical body and that has a finite lifespan, but our spirit has no lifespan. It lives forever. And hearing from that being, we did everything we could. We didn't make any mistakes. They're not upset with us.
No, they still love us and they come visit. They still mess up
Yeah.
the sheets and the pillows and the couch, right? So you mentioned trauma release. How do you help your clients, be it meditation or through coaching, like start to address and release the trauma responses that they
One of
may
my favorite tools I've been using for maybe 4 years now is havening. It's very much like EMDR. And one of the things that I love so much about it is that it's really fast. It works very, very quickly, and it's very effective on everything unless there is shame and or guilt involved. Then you have to use hypnotic regression, in my experience. And it creates a space, much like the way people describe psychedelics, as creating a space where it's like the spirit can come in and it knows exactly how to fix things. So it may fix things by moving the person farther away from the incident, making it harder for them to access it or see it anymore, or it may actually rewrite the incident. Or it may change, part of the rewriting could be, it might change a 7-year-old child into a 37-year-old man or something. It's just remarkable the capacity that we have to change the story so that the trauma doesn't exist as something that's debilitating anymore. And when I say change the story, I don't mean that consciously they don't remember exactly what happened, because they do. It's the subconscious perception shifts from a clear and present danger to neutral, or no longer anything to be worried about. So when the trigger gets pulled, they don't get hijacked. They don't have the same response that they used to have.
Yes.
and some of the work that Maria and I do, when you are like releasing, we tend to keep the client out of constantly repeating what happened. It's like, I just need to know date, time, and a smidge, because then they get trapped in it and it's harder to release the trauma because they almost start to identify. Do you kind of follow similar, or do you have a whole different approach?
I would say I have a whole different approach. I've been doing this for 20 years now, and I've never had a situation where somebody gets stuck in whatever the event was. I mean, you're probably familiar with the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell, and how every root myth in every single culture across the planet has essentially the same story. And the story is something like there's the hero. The hero's really good at something. They're doing that thing, and then there's some kind of accident or a catastrophe. And the hero backs away from it and will do anything they can to avoid it, never go back anywhere near it. And finally, they realize the only way forward is through. And this time when they go through, they build up their courage and they overcome this thing, and they go to a new place that they hadn't been to before. So for me, I draw a lot on my own personal story about going toward the diagnosis of leukemia rather than away, and going toward, like a firefighter, going toward the fire rather than going away. In my experience, the fear is not as big as we are. And the fear gets smaller when we encounter it, but when we encounter it in the right circumstances. So for example, in the fire service, they don't just take you off the street and say, here's some gear, there's a fire, go fight it. They don't show you a movie or make you read a book and then have you do it. Like there's a real process of helping you to understand, what is fire? How does it behave? What are the different ways that you can put it out by removing one of the chemical processes that's going on? Here's all the gear. These are the details of the gear. Now you have your hands on it and you keep training. And when you do those things, then when the incident actually happens, there's definitely fear there, but it's manageable fear, because you've been prepared for it. And I feel like that's exactly what I do with my clients. Like I would never just take somebody off the street and say, okay, let's do a regression to some trauma you had. Never. Like with regression, we're probably going there with their spirit guide or with an ascended master. If something happens that's really intense and the person begins, in hypnotic terms, we call it abreacting. If they begin to abreact, I immediately pull them out of first person into third person, float above the scene where you're totally safe. You can still see what's going on, but you are completely safe. So there's a kind of gauging process. The other thing is that with havening, I know what's going to happen because I've done it so many times that the mind is already going to start solving it. Like within a minute or two, it starts to solve it and move it from something that's still scary into something that's benign and then into something that's empowering. So I believe that there's, at least for me, I believe that there's a lot in that. I think we come from, think about our ancestors and everything that they went through. My goodness, we are endowed with everything that they surmounted, everything that they persevered through. And I really do think that these things actually make us stronger. And so, as I say, I would never want somebody to that I'm working with to ever feel like they're alone. I want them to have their spiritual support and I want them to have my support. Just like in the fire department, we were never, ever alone. That's why that one incident when I was traveling with my family was so rough. I was alone. But even doing the crap jobs in the fire department, you always have at least one other person helping you. You're never just doing it alone. When you go into a building that's on fire and you can't see anything, you can't see your hand in front of your face. It's so dark. There's so much smoke. There's always somebody you can literally touch them. They're in physical contact with you as you're feeling your way into a room, looking for the seat of the fire or looking for victims on the floor. There's always someone with you. And I feel like it's the same thing, that people are encountering things that are really scary in their consciousness. And that if there's a person right there with them that is knowledgeable and is steady and says, okay, that's good. Let the tears come. That's all right. That's what we want. You're doing really well. Here's what to do next. And they're communicating with me so I know kind of where they are and what we need to do.
Hear the questions
So,
in your head, Maria.
yeah, so the compassion coaching, is it happening while you have them doing the having or in hypnosis, or is that separate?
No, that's all the above. That's all
Is
the
all
above.
the above?
That's when
Okay.
we're just talking. That's
Uh-huh.
with havening. That's with hypnosis. That's with regression work the whole time. Because if you think about it, when we really get hurt, it's in relationship. That's where we really get hurt. And if you keep following that line along, it always results in some kind of forgiveness. And there's three kinds as far as I'm concerned. There's forgiving other people for what they've done to us, being forgiven for what we've done to them, and forgiving ourselves. And
I
so
also
at the
include forgiving and learning the lesson of that event that happened.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Forgiving what?
Forgiving and understanding the lessons of that event, however
Yes.
good, bad, or ugly it is. Yeah. So I always add that in
It's
also. Yeah.
It sounds very similar to, and I can never say it because there's so many O's, the Ho'oponopono, open up. You say it, Maria.
Ho'oponopono. Ho'oponopono. Yeah. Because Ho'oponopono is just forgiving the event, forgiving the person, forgiving yourself, and learning from that lesson of that event, how good, bad, or ugly the trauma was.
Now, in all the services that you offer and do, how can people find you?
Best
Website,
is my
book,
website, which is
social?
blueskyhypnosis.com. That's the best way to find me and to contact me. I also have a channel on YouTube with over 250 pieces of content, most of which is like a guided hypnotic experience. Could be a past life regression, could be weight loss, could be healing your inner child. There's all kinds of content there, and that's also called Blue Sky Hypnosis.
Okay. Because I'm sure people are wondering how and where they can, reach you and see what all you do. For somebody who might be struggling with hypnosis and let's say it's like a monkey mind, do you have tips? So if they're trying to listen to one of your hypnosis sessions on YouTube, how can they kind of quiet that mind and fall into that hypnosis?
It would be awareness of the law of reversed effect. In other words, the harder you try not to do something, the more you will do it. So if you're trying to go to sleep because you got to get up early in the morning, you're not going to fall asleep. And it's the same with hypnosis. It's the same with regression, that we really want to help people give themselves permission to just let it be whatever it wants to be, because we don't know exactly how your subconscious mind is going to interact with this material. We don't know exactly how your spirit guides even are going to present things to you. So, for example, I remember one time I was working with a woman and she reported that her past life regression, everything she saw was a cartoon. And in our present day way of thinking, we could easily have dismissed that and say, well, it's a cartoon. Something's not working. Let's stop this. And I just said, it's okay. Just go with it. And at the end of the regression, I had her ask her spirit guide, why was my past life shown to me as a cartoon? And the immediate answer she got was because to show it to you in any more realistic form would have been too traumatizing. So the lesson there is to take whatever's coming, to not prejudge it and think you're doing it wrong or something isn't working. We live in a very visual society, and yet people are either visual, primarily visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. And it doesn't mean that a kinesthetic person whose primary representational system is that doesn't also hear things and they don't also see things. They do. But it may be that in a regression, for example, or meeting their spirit guide, that they feel something, or someone else may hear it, but everything else is black. And just because it's black, it doesn't mean it's not working. And I can't tell you how many people I've worked with where they get to this sort of penultimate moment and they say, no, everything's black. And I say, okay, are you standing, sitting, or lying down? And they might say, I'm lying down. Okay, I want you to stand up. And so they stand up. Now, this is all in their consciousness. They stand up and I say, what does the floor feel like? Does it feel like sand or grass or bricks or stone or cement? What does it feel like? It feels like stone. Okay. And then I pull from the fire department, which is if you're lost, you walk in any direction, lost inside a house, you walk in any direction. So I say, just walk forward till you contact a wall. That's what we do when you can't see a damn thing. So they walk forward. I say, you have a wall? Yeah, great. Put your left hand on the wall and start following the wall until you find a door or a window. Okay, got the window. Look outside the window. Tell me what you see. I see stars and the moon. Well, they went to a regression where they were sleeping in the middle of the night. That's why everything was dark.
Nice. I was thinking you're going to be like, there are people, I was astounded when I learned that there are people who can't visualize in their mind.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, movies play for me. I can't imagine not being able to visualize. And I know there are some hypnotherapy sessions where they're like, visualize this. And I'm like, so then what does that person do?
Exactly.
And is
I
it
think
like
that's called, is that called synesthesia? I think that condition might be called synesthesia.
Yeah.
So here's what I would want people to consider if they were diagnosed with synesthesia, if I've got that word right, is the subconscious mind's job is to protect you. If a person is doing a past life regression track on my YouTube channel, or they're in my office or they're in yours and they can't get there, it's a block because the subconscious knows they're going to go back to something traumatic. And it's trying to prevent them from going there. It's been suppressing this material for God knows how long. And so in that case, you have to overcome the block. And once you overcome the block, here comes the regression. And I really wonder if for people with synesthesia, if it's not just a really intense block to, in quotation marks, protect them from past traumas. I mean, there's a condition you're probably aware of called, I remember learning about it in psychology class, called hysterical blindness. When someone sees something so traumatic, the mind just shuts off the ability to see, not because there's been any damage to the eyes or the optic nerve, but because it has that ability to shut anything down anytime it wants. And so when I work with people who have a block, we just work at resolving the block. And once we resolve the block, bing, it just opens up. It took me many years to figure this out.
It's interesting because I hear that a lot in the store when the client is like, I would like to get a hypnotherapy session. If somebody says visualize a beach, like I can't see the beach, I can't, and I'm like,
no, but that same person could probably feel the warmth of the sun on their skin.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That same person could probably hear the seagulls and could probably hear the sound of the surf. They could probably feel themselves floating on their back in the water with the waves gently rocking them. And if you do that, that starts to open up that part of you. And then comes the visual. So for me personally, my lead representational system is auditory. I hear things really well. I don't always see it really well. Sometimes it's crystal clear, but most of the time it's just sort of a fuzzy outline or a fuzzy shape. But I've learned it doesn't matter. If they want me to see something clear, they'll present it clearly, you know?
I'm still waiting for the guys to start writing on the wall in Sharpies like I've often asked them to do. And I'm like, quit being confusing. Just write it on the wall for me. And I'm still waiting for that. Maria, I've been hogging him. What questions do you?
Well, the one thing is the clients. So I'm trying to understand. Because I do hypnotherapy also, and I do past life regression. I like that technique because there are some of my clients that it takes a while for them to be in that scene, and I like what you just said. I learned something today. That's great. My question for you is sometimes the hypnosis may not work for that client. What else do you offer the clients? Because hypnosis, I mean, going to past life regression, it may not give them the answers that they need. Is there something else in your tool belt that you offer the clients?
Well, yeah, we talked about havening, and I use
Mm-hmm.
havening quite frequently. Hypnosis, neurolinguistic programming, coaching. These are the main tools that I use. And I also would question the it's not working. Like, what does that mean? For you, when a client says or you say it's hypnosis is not working, what does that mean?
Well, if I have a client has come to see me at least 7 times and it's the same issue, so then I said, well, this is the other things that I can offer. Do you want to give it a try?
Okay, so let me stop you right there. Give me an example of something that they came 7 times for and it wasn't working. Was it
It was a person who had anger issues. They had
anger?
anger
Okay.
issues. Yeah.
Okay. So I earlier on, I would ascertain if that client has a block, right? So if the subconscious mind is afraid of letting go of the anger, then it doesn't matter what you do, it's not going to get through it. If the subconscious mind believes that it's dangerous for the person to let that go, if the person is filled with hatred, or here's something we haven't talked about yet, that same person might have spiritual entities attached to them. They might have entities that are evil attached to them. And that's where the anger is coming from. And if that's the case, then we would have to move those entities out and see what's going on with the anger. And if they still have the anger after the entities are gone, maybe now the hypnosis actually works because we don't have a block. So my larger point here is that if past life regression isn't working, there is a block. The block could be simply disbelief, but usually it has to do with the subconscious mind trying to suppress information coming forward. And in the same way, if the person's not able to release anger, my question in my mind is, what is the block? Before I try something else, I would want to know what the block is. Once I know what the block is, I can clear the block, and then we can see if it works. It probably will.
There
I'm
are
glad you
some clients. Yeah. There are some clients also have this is their fuel for life. They're not ready to release the anger. They got comfortable with the anger. They got comfortable with the emotions. If we were to take that out, they don't know what to do with themselves because they have spent X amount of time during the day getting angry.
Okay, so I don't know if you had the same language, but we were taught that that's a negative payoff or a secondary gain. And what I use with those people is I negotiate with them while they're in hypnosis. And I say, are you willing to let go of the anger for 45 seconds with the proviso that after 45 seconds, you can take it right back? This is just an experiment so you can notice what it feels like to be free of the anger. Most people say yes. And then I say, okay, start the count. At the end of 45 seconds, I ask them, how do you feel? Wow, I feel so good. Really? How good do you feel? Well, I feel light. I feel like I've got a piano that came off my shoulders. Okay, great. How else do you feel? And they describe how good they're feeling. I help them go deeper into those good feelings. And then I say, would you like the anger back? That was the deal. Do you want it back? Well, yeah, I think I still want it back. Great. 3, 2, 1, you got the anger back. And then I say, how would you like to try that again? But this time we try it for, say, a minute and a half. Okay. And I just keep doing this over and over again as they get more and more accustomed to the good feelings, knowing that most people eventually are going to say, you know what, I don't think I need that. I don't think I want it anymore, which then would probably open them for other kinds of work because then that is not there anymore as a block. I feel like we are so powerful.
Oh, yeah.
We create our own heaven and we create our
Yep.
own hell, generally speaking.
Oh, yeah.
And when people are empowered and they start to recognize this and they start to understand the reasons why they do what they do, it becomes easier to untangle the knot, at least in my experience.
Yeah.
I like that. The simple bargaining, and teach them what it
Yeah.
feels like to not.
Yes,
Yeah.
and the other part of the
See.
bargaining, this is also very powerful, is you have them ask their spirit guide, who benefits by you being angry? Do you? Does your
Mhm.
wife? Does your kids? Your neighbors? People you work with? I know what the answer is going to be. I call myself a spiritual lawyer sometimes because I know what the answers are. And then I say, who would benefit by you releasing the anger? Because a lot of times people won't do it for themselves, but they would do it for them kid. And when they hear from someone other than me that their kids would actually benefit, and then you can even say, well, why? Why would they benefit? Well, because they would be less stressed out. They would actually have a father around because they wouldn't do this when they become parents. That person is like, okay, I'm ready to let it go now because my perspective has shifted. I feel like when someone gets stuck, it's because the perspective is fused in place. And our job is to try to shift that perspective so they can see it from a different angle. This is exactly what Dickens's Christmas Carol was all about. Nobody had to tell Scrooge he was a bad man and he was going to go to hell. All he had to do was show him the ghost of Christmas past, present, and future to change the perspective, to see the world from Tiny Tim's perspective. And it's the same thing with the movie It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart. His guardian angel showed him what Bedford Falls would be like if he had never lived, because he was saying he wishes he had never lived. And when he comes back, same thing. His perspective has shifted. That's what we're doing. We're helping people to shift their perspective because when it shifts, they change.
It's almost like it's that perspective where they're too far in the situation, what they're going through, that they
Mhm.
can't see the forest through the trees.
Yes, exactly. And that's what an enormous tool hypnosis is, because it has the ability to show someone a different version of reality from the one that they see behind their two eyeballs.
Mhm.
I can see your hamster wheels turning, Maria. You're rewriting your
Oh
scripts
yeah.
already.
Yeah. I'm rewriting my scripts. No, because I do energy work also, and what I do move into is when a client, I know about the entities that you're talking about because I have seen them. I've seen those entities on the clients, and I know basically what I need to do to remove them. So, do you remove the entities through your tools, or you probably would recommend someone else?
I facilitate the removal.
Okay.
The client is the one who removes the entities.
Okay.
I facilitate it. And it's all done. What I've discovered, what I've learned is that it's all based on the law of free will. So I say that when a person has entities attached to them, it behaves like Velcro. There has to be two sides, a hook and a loop that come together like this. And the client has their own attachment to the entity. They've given some kind of permission at some point. Maybe it was in a past lifetime. Maybe it was subconscious. Maybe it was simply tacit approval, like leaving the front door to your house open and going on vacation. It doesn't guarantee that somebody's going to come in your house and sit on your sofa and watch your television, but they could. And they could argue to the judge, well, they left their door open. So it's the same with people. They might be an alcoholic, which is essentially leaving your door open every day when you're drinking. Somebody's going to wander in there, or multiple spiritual entities are going to wander in there. In many cases, it's maybe a deceased relative and the client's holding on. It could also be, and I've run into this so many times I can't count, that a woman has had an abortion and the spirit of the child is holding on. How are you going to get that mother to let go of that child? You can't just, in my opinion, you can't just start cutting cords. You can't start pulling apart if you don't know who the entity is, or you don't know what the attachment is, right?
Mhm.
Another one of my clients
Yes.
had the spirit of like a 4-year-old child attached to him. And he said that he had this other issue since his daughter was born. Well, what happened is that maybe this 4-year-old died in the hospital. He's waiting for his daughter, his wife, to give birth to his daughter. And this little girl maybe died in that hospital. She was confused and she saw him. He's a father. He's a nice guy. She attaches to him. And subconsciously, he probably thought, she's alone. She can't be just left like this. And he allowed her to attach. But consciously, he didn't know that. Well, we can't go cord cutting with them. We can't pull them apart. Once we know it's a 4-year-old little girl, we bring somebody from the other side who already loves her, like a grandmother or something, or maybe an angel. So he can lovingly hand off this being to another loving being. And then the separation is just so gentle. There's no violence. There's no force. It unfolds beautifully. And I have found it's the same thing. This is just my experience in my tiny little corner of the world. I'm not speaking for everybody, but even with demons, when you, through the client, you let the demon know how this ends, demon. And you don't send the client in alone. You have them go in with ascended masters. If they're a Christian, they go in with Jesus, they go in with Mary, they go in with Archangel Michael and other angels. You come in with a posse and you let the demon know, you do not have my permission to be attached to me anymore. Any contracts, oaths, agreements, promises I ever made, I revoke them now, permanently and forever. And I send all of my attention to God, all of my attention to the light. I have no business with you. You must leave. And P.S., you know how this ends. And this is your chance to atone for whatever it is that you've done and go home, because it's going to happen anyway. You might as well do it now.
No, I'm glad we brought up this topic, because I was going to, kind of hint in an email later, like, would you be willing to come back and talk about this more in depth? Because I do a Wednesday morning paranormal, and that comes up at times of attachments, and is the place haunted? Is the person haunted? How does some of that run and work? And had some really interesting, guests. But, when it comes to the healing side of it, understanding and maybe realizing if and when you might have one, how do you handle it? What is the healing after? Because, sometimes the clients are so used to having that spiritual being that maybe they don't want to let go of them, because now that's a change. And they're so used to that feeling and being afraid of letting them go, because now it's going to feel different. So, all of this healing aspect for the person here in the living body and, the spiritual attachment of whatever sort that may be. So I feel like this could be a really in-depth, topic all on its own, if you might be willing to come back and talk on it. Because, I'm all for healing the living and the other side as well.
Me too.
Mm-hmm.
Me too. I think both sides definitely should be considered,
Mm-hmm.
because it's
Yeah.
not just about the client.
Yeah.
No.
No.
And I might be the weirdo that I'm like, even the demonic are in some sort of search of healing as well, and
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. If there's a battle for souls, and I think there is, if evil and darkness is engaged in what I would term a corruption of people, that is basically like a seduction process. It's not all at once. Like, let's go do something really heinous, but let's do it slowly. You want that fame. Well, okay, how about this? How about that? It's a very slow kind of process of seduction until the person realizes at some point that they might as well, because they've already gone this far.
Mm-hmm.
If that's what's going on, then if we're on the side of, say, God or the light, able to help beings that are in the darkness come back to the light, that's good for us. That's good for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's my theory about even the whole demon thing, is I think they believe that there is no redemption for them. And I don't personally believe that's true. I believe we are all created by God. We are all, in essence, fallen, and that we're all trying to work our way back to God, even them. And forgiveness and redemption is always possible. Now, that's just my understanding. I'm not saying I have any special insight greater than anyone else's. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's been my experience with this.
Mm-hmm. Well, the compassion, even for them, right?
Yeah.
Even for them, while still being tough, because there has to be a kind of toughness. Like, it's time to get out.
It's the tough love, the parental tough love in a way. Like, quit
I
acting
think
like
so.
a fool.
And being wary and having that spiritual support present. In my case, I want Jesus, I want Mary, I want Angel Michael, and I want other angels there. I don't want to freelance this. I want the person's spirit guide there. I want to call in the posse.
Yeah,
And I don't feel like I'm doing it. I feel like I'm helping to orchestrate it as a kind of go-between between the spirit world and having experience of how this all works, and the client. And I'm there if the client is reluctant, for the reasons that you said, perhaps, to let it go, to say, okay, do the same thing. Negotiate with the client. Are you willing to let Uncle Joe go for 30 seconds so you can feel what it's like? So Uncle Joe can feel what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
And usually what they say is, I'll say, well, how does Uncle Joe seem now? Let him go to the light for 30 seconds and come back. And they say, he's smiling. He loves it there. Does he want to come back and be attached to you? No. Do you want to have him hanging on anymore? No. Great. Let him go. You can meet with him anytime you want. It's just he's not going to be living in your spare bedroom anymore.
And being an energy drain and making you feel tired
Exactly.
and sick
Yeah.
and everything else. Yeah. It can be a much more positive influence in the light.
Yeah. So here's a real world example. It happened just a couple of days ago. I have a client whose grandfather fought in the German army in World War II on the Eastern Front, which is the worst of the worst. And he was captured by the Soviets, horrendous. And when I read about history, only about 10% of those men survived this horrific treatment at the hands of the Soviets. And he was attached to this client. And as he emerged from her, the client described half of him looked like a human being and half of him was just black. And so I said, ask Jesus, who was there, if he will hold this man in his arms, which he did. And this man put his head on Jesus's chest. And the client said that her grandfather was not resisting any of it. It's like he needed this. And I said, ask Jesus if Jesus will take him into the light and let the healing continue there. Yes, good. Everybody's happy. She's able to let him go because she's not worried about him. He's in good hands. He wanted to be in those good hands. He'd suffered enough. And they know more than we do. Taking him to the light, rehabilitate him, do whatever you're going to do. I don't know what it is, but you're going to rehabilitate him. And it's all done peacefully. There's no get out the sword and hack the cords. None of that. There's no tearing apart. There's no anger and frustration and fear. No, it's very, very peaceful. That's always what I'm looking for. What is the smartest police officers I ever ran into in my life were the ones that didn't use force. The force was always there. It was always implied, but they used their mouth. Mm-hmm. They talked their way through this. I had experiences like that myself. In college, if you can believe it, I was a bouncer in a nightclub for a while. And the whole time I did this, I only got into a physical altercation one time. All the other times, I just talked. I used my words. I treated people with respect. It doesn't always work. Like I got in that one thing, but all the other times it did. I wasn't trying to be, I have power and you don't, or I'm going to bring in more force or whatever. It was just talking to them like human beings. That kind of situation is always better if you don't have to use violence, if you can talk your way through this.
I'm still game. If you have it in your schedule at some point to come back, we can talk about the whole spirit and, the healing aspects and why, it's not good to let, Uncle Bob hang around. Or,
exactly. For you or for Uncle Bob.
Right. And why that healing and letting go is important all the way around. Because I feel like a lot of people kind of cross the line when they're working with the ancestors, but then sometimes they get trapped in an ancestor who hasn't crossed over that's hanging around that's causing problems. And I'm like, nah, that's not really the veneration we're looking for, And not all ancestors, just because they have the title ancestor doesn't mean they're great and lifted and, going to give the greatest advice. So I already know me. Whoever I'm going to be the ancestor for, I'm going to be that smart ass ancestor, tough love, and show love through flipping you off, but also giving you the information you need. So I show love through bullying. But, if you're open for it, we can talk about it. We'll get that scheduled. And I've already got like bullet point questions, all of that.
All right.
Because I feel like it's an important topic.
Thanks so much for today. It was a wonderful conversation.
No, thank you for joining and your story. And we've talked about hypnosis before, but you have some amazing points that we haven't touched on. I love that. And speaking of your hypnosis, your YouTube channel is called now what again for all of our friends who want to come listen to your stuff?
Blue Sky Hypnosis.
And you have
that's the name of my website too, Blue Sky Hypnosis.
And if they want to get in touch with you, can you do hypnosis like virtual or like Zoom if they don't live?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Just through the website, they can find everything they're going to need there.
Awesome. I'm going to go check that out and be like, what is one to turn off the overactive mind and go to sleep quickly? We have one of those.
To give you a quick tip,
Sure.
it
Sure.
gets back to that law of reversed effect. So I used to do this with my kids when they couldn't sleep. I would walk in there and I'd say, you know exactly what to do, which is to lie there with your eyes open and tell yourself you're not allowed to go to sleep. And if your eyes start to close, you must open them. And no matter how heavy your eyelids get, you have to open them up. You're not allowed to sleep.
I'm going to try this.
Boom!
I've tried the military breathing and everything else that they say works for special forces, and I'm still laying there like, well,
Yeah,
that
just
didn't work.
Just
Let's try again.
imagine that you're not allowed to close your eyes. And if they start to close, if they start to get heavier and heavier, you got to open them back up. No matter how heavy they get, you got to open them back up.
Definitely going to try
Now,
that.
does that work when you wake up in the middle of the night, but you can't go back to sleep?
I would do the same thing. And for me, it doesn't happen often, but I do that and that really works. And then there are other times when I sometimes just have to change my location. Like I have to go from, the master bedroom into a guest bed or something. And maybe I might just read for a little while and then I can go back to sleep. For whatever reason that works. But the law of reversed effect is a real thing. And nothing works all the time for everyone, but it's a potent tool to employ in those moments. And if that didn't work, then the next thing I would want to know is, okay, why? I use an idiomotor tool with my clients. And so I would do the same thing. I would just get out a pendulum and say, is it something biochemical, and rule that in or rule that out? Is it some kind of old trauma? Am I hypervigilant? If I'm hypervigilant, is it because something happened to me in the past when I was sleeping? Was I attacked when I was sleeping, for example? If a person has a chronic issue.
Mm-hmm.
So I would want to winnow it down because what I feel like I've learned is that nothing occurs in a vacuum. Everything has a root all the way down to a root cause. Everything, nothing. Even if we don't understand it, there is a root cause. Every outcome has a cause. There's a cause to everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so our job, like a car mechanic, is to figure out what's the cause of this symptom and work on the root cause and don't worry about the symptoms so much. Just let that be an indication that something else exists that's deeper. And if it hasn't gone away, it just means we haven't gotten to it. We haven't resolved it yet. That's how I see it.
Still processing and still chipping away. Well, thank you for joining. It's been
Yes.
really fun in learning. And I know, Maria, like I said, you're rewriting scripts. I can hear your hamster wheels rewriting. But yeah, everybody check out Peter, Blue Sky Hypnosis on YouTube and Blue Sky Hypnosis if you would like to
Indeed,
get in
yeah.
touch with Peter, maybe book a session. Find out all the other cool things that he does and offers, because you offer hypnosis, coaching, compassionate coaching.
Yeah. And I basically, somebody they don't care what tools I'm using. They care about the outcome. Just like if you hire a carpenter to build a deck onto your house, you don't care what tool that they're using, a circular saw or a reciprocating saw or a power drill. You just want the deck built. So people come to me with issues. What we're focused on is helping them resolve those issues. And I've mentioned the different tools that I use, but to the client, the tools aren't really what's important. It's the outcome. So we focus on the outcome.
There you go. And wonderful job. From the stories that you've been saying, how many people you've helped. It's amazing.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. But thanks for joining. Thanks for sharing your
Sure.
story.
You bet.
I look forward to our spirit attachment discussion.
Okay.
And the healing work we can do with that. But Maria, do you have any last minute questions before we let him enjoy his evening?
No, but this was really fun. Learn a lot to add
And I'm
to
so
my
glad to
tools.
have met you two as well. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
And we look forward to you joining us for the next episode of The Healer's Corner. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Healer's Corner podcast. Join us again soon.